I'm Amal, and I'm joined here with Adrienne Maree Brown, who has come all the way from Detroit to Dubai to be with us today. But before I introduce her and this panel, which is called "The Future Was Collective," I'd just like to introduce you all to some of our muses who have been silently sitting with all of our panelists over the course of today. So first, and one of these muses are going to play a role in this work, in this next panel. This is Ruqayya Begum Ruqayya. She is the author of Sultana's Dream. Uzma mentioned her in her introduction earlier. She wrote the first science fiction novel, utopic feminist science fiction novel, The Turn of the Century. She is indeed a muse, and we'd like to bring her into this space now. We're also joined by Valentina Tereshkova. She was the first woman in space. Yeah. And here we have Maria from Metropolis. She was the first robot in cinema. And then, of course, we have Octavia Butler. And sitting next to me is someone that is much better placed to explain the importance of this figure. So I think it was great, actually, to follow on from Sohrab and his speaking about hopelessness and Tehran. And in my work as a curator, I work often with artists and communities. We do a lot of projects outside of exhibition spaces and museum spaces. And when you work in the rhythm of a city as opposed to the rhythm of an exhibition space or a museum, you are working within the politics of that space and within the struggles of that space, whatever that space would be. And I'm constantly thinking about the questions around art and its intersections with social change or political work. And I think often when we're discussing work together, when we're doing these kinds of projects, we're often thinking that it seems that the future has belonged to people who have not really lived with struggle. And I think it's an important thing to start with when we're thinking about how art intersects with social change. So, can science fiction spur social change? Science fiction often evokes images of space and future technologies, but fantasy worlds are also being used to think through attitudes towards racism, violence, gender discrimination, class, and other struggles. Through imagination, science fiction writers are creating alternative realities to critiquing our existing universe. Last summer, I was lucky enough to come across a book called Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction Stories for Social Movements. And it's a collection of original science fiction written by people who are doing social justice work. It's inspired by Octavia Butler, who, if you do not know her work, she is a pioneer. She's a pioneer like all of these women, whose work offer radical explorations into the nature of power and oppression. And I think is really an instigator for really thinking about social change. I couldn't get the subtitle of the publication out of my head, All Organizing as Science Fiction. And I'm super excited that the co-editor of this book is with me today, Adrienne Maree Brown. Her, along with her other co-editor, Walida Mrashia, coined the term visionary fiction. And today, Adrienne is going to be presenting this work, not the publication, but her work around visionary fiction. Adrienne is, apart from being an Octavia Butler scholar, she is a doula, a pleasure activist, an organizer, a facilitator of workshops. And we decided today that we're going to workshop some ideas together here today. And so I'm going to hand you over now to Adrienne. Thank you.
Hello. So the first thing I'm going to ask everyone to do is actually stand up for a moment. Some of you have been standing, but many of you have been sitting like me for 4 hours. And we're just going to want to invite Octavia into the room. So Octavia Butler was a Black science fiction writer. She wrote 12 novels. She was writing by herself. As far as she knew, there weren't other Black science fiction writers, and she wanted there to be a field of science fiction writers who were not white men, because we had enough of the world imagined by white men. So she just thought, hey, we could popularize this. So to call her in, put your feet about shoulder width apart, drop your hands to your sides, wiggle your bum if you have a little locked up hip area, because we need that pelvic thrust motion, yeah, okay? And then close your eyes. I can see you, so don't cheat, yeah? And just come into awareness of your own body for a moment. This is your unique, miraculous vessel through space-time, whatever you believe about space-time. Your body is just moving through it for a particular moment of it. And how is your body doing today? Are you feeling hyper-miraculous, like a change maker, well-nourished, well-rested, drunk, something else? Whatever, you just notice your own feelings. And we're going to come into an intentional place where we are ones who make change. So Octavia teaches us these words, and you can repeat them back to me as I say them to you. All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. Now open up your eyes and just look around the room for a moment and just imagine if only the people in this room were responsible for the future. How would that feel to you? Right? What kind of level of responsibility would you want everyone in the room to take for what happens next? Right? So just look around and say, do you feel confident? Do you feel some questions? Right? Just notice it, no judgment. Right? Because anything you don't like about someone else is actually about yourself. We'll talk about that another time. So now you can have a seat, and hopefully Octavia feels here. I'm going to try not to sit on her face, although I've always wondered about that. Because I'm a pleasure activist. So when I have a crush on someone, I'm like, oh, how would that be? All right. So I'm going to speak to you, and I'm going to really stick to what I have on the page here to try to keep it in like 15 minutes or less, so that then we can spend some more time playing together, okay? So the first thing, all organizing is science fiction. What does that mean? It's a catchy phrase. I come from organizing background, so I've been, I'm picking up on your accent. That's not how I talk. Anyway, I'll try to get back to how I talk. So I talk like an American who has no accent from anywhere important. Does Detroit have an accent? What's our accent? I don't know because I'm immersed in it. Okay, so all organizing is science fiction. I grew up as a military brat, and when I got politicized in high school, I turned to my father and I was just like, you're a murderer. And he was like, well, I did it to go to college. And that began my relationship with contradictions and politicization and understanding that there's very little that's simple. But there are those of us who look at existing mechanisms, existing world, and we say, I want to change this. I think I could do something better than this. I think a lot of us in this room feel this way. And the idea behind all organizing is science fictional behavior, right? Is that you're looking at something and saying, this has never existed. We've never felt a world without war, without hunger, without poverty, where everyone has a garden and a lute and whatever else you think. So whether it's heaven or utopia or something else, we've never experienced this. And we're going to bend the future. We're going to co-create the future to make that happen. So people who are doing that kind of social change work are science fictional, which a lot of them find very rewarding, because it's more like you're in the Matrix instead of just a constant like class on Marxism. Which Marx is so fun, right? But we're imagining what doesn't exist and we're shaping it. I'm so glad someone got that joke. Marx is not fun. I don't know if you ever read it, but it's good stuff. There's stuff in there. So Walida Imarisha and I came together around this idea. I was obsessing over Octavia Butler, and I was reading her as an organizer and finding that I was more inspired by the ideas in those books than I was by anything I was learning in my political realm. And so I kept trying to sneak the ideas over. And finally I realized I had to come out of the closet and say that I was taking science fiction seriously for my political development. And I wanted to see if anyone else was doing the same thing. And Walida was doing the same thing. She was talking about visionary fiction. So we came together and we crafted this idea of visionary fiction. And the idea behind it is that art is not neutral, right? Art is not neutral. You're either advancing justice and liberation and a higher evolution of humanity, or you are perpetuating a status quo. And what we found was that most fiction, even science fiction that's supposed to be super out there in the future, was perpetuating the same tropes. The same people got to be the heroes. The same people, the same dynamics always played out. We mentioned Matt Damon earlier today, and I always say that I wanted to create a book full of stories in which Matt Damon could never be cast as the lead character. Because he's gonna be okay. We know he's in the future. He's like got all of Mars, and I just want some other place for our people to be. We also realized that the more people who co-create the future, right? The future is collective is my title. The more people who co-create something, the more people who find themselves feeling at home and safe inside of it. So right now, we are all living inside the imagination of someone else, right? Someone else imagined this power structure wherein white people were superior, wherein men were superior, wherein straight people were superior, wherein whatever served that person was superior. And we live inside of that, and we struggle and try to say, no, I'm equal. Like the fact that I even have to argue with that is ridiculous, or any of these other concepts. But when we get into community work and community organizing, we see that when people start to co-create a concept or a community or their block together, they feel at home, they feel safe there. So what does it look like to actually create fiction from that place in a collective way, to have people collaboratively ideate what are the worlds we want, and not utopian or dystopian. So we really want to move away from that, because as we know, living in this world, utopia and dystopia coexist, right? So in Dubai, it's really interesting because it kind of looks like utopia to the right, dystopia to the left, as far as I can tell in every direction I've gone. But I don't know what it's like to be on the 50th floor. Maybe it's not that utopian either, right? So what Octavia's Brood holds is 20 stories from people who are shaping change in the world, including one from me, which is about Detroit and gentrification. And in my story, the Detroit River rises up and sweeps away all the people who don't love the city. So that's the spoiler, but it feels important to mention this because typically people don't read me as a very angry or vengeful person. But I loved when the speaker was just talking about hopelessness, right? Because I do think it's important to tap into hopelessness and find a way to let it roll through a community in order to move out. I think if we push it down, grief and hopelessness and all those things just wait for us. And they wait until we're ready and then they overwhelm us, all right? But as a community, we can use art and fiction to release some of these grand emotions so that we have more room for creating for other things. The other things that are in there are 2 essays, one from Tananarive Due, who's a horror writer who you should all read her work. It's incredible. D-U-E is the last name. The other is from a prisoner named Mumia Abu Jamal, who has been on death row, has come off of death row. He's in prison in Pennsylvania. But we also felt it was important that we understand what does the future look like and what is the analysis of someone who's been living their whole life behind bars, discarded by our society, quote unquote. And he writes about American imperialism and the movie Star Wars and how nifty and cute it is that people in America thought that they were the rebels when actually they're empire, right? And how that's actually often the case, that people think they're being so rebellious when actually they're upholding empire, they're upholding the status quo. So we made a lot of workshops to go with this because we realized we didn't want to just create a product that people came and they get the product and they go, because that just perpetuates the same thing that we don't want to do. So one of those workshops is a collective science fiction writing workshop where people come together, we imagine the world We pick an issue. So it might be water. In Detroit, water is a major area where you're in battle right now. We pick the issue, and together everyone co-creates what is it that would actually be realistic solutions, and then what would be the new problems that we would face in that scenario, and how do we use writing and creating together to move through all those realms. They're really nice, they're really fun, but the thing that's been very fascinating to me is when we approached the writers for the book, they were organizers, and they all laughed at us. Most of them laughed in our face. They're like, I don't write science fiction. I don't write fiction. I never saw Star Trek. I don't do that thing with my hand. I don't know what you're talking about. And we said, please just give us 10 pages because we think you're changing the world, you're unique. And almost all of them came back, and they were like, I have 50 pages. My characters come to me when I'm in the kitchen, and they tell me what they want me to write. And it was just like this amazing, dramatic turnaround. And so the theory we tested then in the workshops was that actually everyone has universes and worlds inside of them, but they don't have permission to release that, right? And what does it look like to give people permission? And actually, for a lot of people who've been oppressed, getting permission in a collective environment is the first step towards getting permission to do it on your own, right? So first we do it together, and then we all realize, oh, we can all do this. There's enough room, actually. There's multiverse room. There's room and room and room and rooms upon rooms for all of these creatings, all these worlds. So, yay. We're moving along through the speech. That may have been an important page. But, oh, that was an important page. Where did it go? Help, collective peoples. Thank you. I also needed you to pick it up. That was just exciting. All right, so permission, vision. Oh, the other thing I said earlier, that we're living in someone's imagination, and right now I think it's important to say that often it's the imagination of someone who hates us, but has convinced us that we want to be them. Do you know what I mean? So when we were getting people to start telling their stories, a lot of times they were trying to write themselves into these heroic characters where they were doing things that they've had done to them, like the worst of what's been done to them, right? And I say this is important because we see this play out in the world over and over again. In the US, this has played out over and over again. In Detroit, we have all black people in government, and they've done the same horrible things to us, right? Or we look at Israel, Palestine. We look at these situations where it's like, oh, have you experienced traumatic, horrific oppression? What happens as soon as you gain power? How do you change your behavior, right? So there's also this case that the singular vision serves the elite, right? One vision serves 1% of all the people in the world. And in that vision, if you're constantly buying into that elite vision, there's no room for memory, because if you can remember what trauma has been done to you, you won't buy in and completely become a good consumer of what's happening now, right? So someone was telling me that even here in Dubai, there's been this process of erasing whatever happened here so that people can be good consumers of what's here now. So it's an important thing to pay attention when you look at all the beauty. It's like, well, what was erased in order to create room for that beauty? Who was erased often to create room for that beauty? There's a lot of things here about pleasure. Are you interested in pleasure activism? Yes? So one of the things I talk about a lot is that I want justice and freedom to actually be the most pleasurable experiences humans can have. And right now, it's kind of like, oh, we have to slow down and have a horrific consensus process so that everyone can tell their truth and reconciliation. And it's not very fun to actually engage in justice. But Tony K. Bambara talks about this, that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And so this is something I always task people with, especially those who consider themselves creators, is how do you actually make it a pleasurable thing for people to engage in their own liberation? And then that means that people have to be able to feel, right? So that's why I asked you to stand up and be in your body before we started. Because here, pleasure doesn't all live right here, right? It's not all in your mind, at least not yet. We still have bodies, and we can still engage them. But we all live in societies that have repressed our feeling selves. And art is actually one of the ways we awaken our feeling selves. You have a visceral reaction to something. I'm trying to say, how do we get people to have a visceral reaction to things that are actually in their best interest and actually good for them? So in the US, I've done a lot of sex education because people are taught horrific things about sex. And it's not until you're like 35 and you realize like, oh, sex should be just pleasurable for me and it's not all about your penis. That's amazing. Or whatever it is, it's just a long time coming till you figure out, oh, what is pleasure for me? And how do we get people to, as early as possible in their life, start to learn that pleasure is actually a great thing and not something to be punished or quieted down. And Audre Lorde, have you heard of Audre Lorde? Anyone? Audre Lorde has this amazing essay called The Uses of the Erotic. She talks about how if you can awaken your ability to feel anything, it'll change how you feel everything. And if you can awaken pleasure, you'll no longer settle for suffering, right? That's pleasure activism in a nutshell. Is like, what would it look like if all of our communities were completely awakened to pleasure? And that then we organized ourselves around what we wanted to say yes to in the world rather than what we want to say no to. Right now, it's always, we don't want more of this. It's absolutely fucking no, 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 right? But that actually doesn't inspire people very much, right? Most people, they're like, I know. How many things can I sign up to say no to? How many times can I donate to say no to this? But actually, people then eventually back away from that and they turn towards what's pleasing to them. Their lovers, their partners, their children, other things. So how do we actually bring those two things together? I think that's all I'm gonna say. I have this whole other section on emergence strategy and learning the natural operating systems of the world and figuring out how to use those as humans. But I'd rather have you experience it than say something to you. So we're gonna stand again, and this time I'm gonna have you turn and face someone who you don't already know. You didn't come here with this person. So just do it. Just trust me, it'll take like 2 seconds. And don't run away if you're terrified of other people. Just notice that terror. And don't say anything. Just shut up. Just be totally quiet. Totally quiet. So this is going to be awkward only for like 2 minutes, and then I'll let you go. So just notice first thing, if you're able to stand face to face with this person, which means your forehead and your heart and your gut and your toes would line up with this person. And then second, notice the connection between the two of you. Do you have yourself, are you crossing your arms? Are your hands in your pockets? Are you doing anything else that's kind of a blocking move, right? Just relax your shoulders, let your arms drop to the side, and just be in your body. And just, these are the ways you signal to someone, oh, you're not a danger to me in this moment, and I'm not a danger to you in this moment, so I'll let my shoulders kind of relax. And then just, yeah, you guys are adjusting so beautifully. It's amazing. And now I know I look fantastic today. I really do feel that way about myself. So you don't have to look at me anymore, okay? Really tune into this person in front of you. Notice how fantastic their humanity looks to you, right? This is a miraculous creature. You could never recreate this person, right? They have the whole life of experience. So just imagine the years spilling out behind them that you don't know about. Think about what they've survived. Think about what they've already created. And I want you to extend to this person that their life is worthwhile. That their life is worthwhile, just their existence is worthwhile and even miraculous, if you can permit that. That you are looking at an element of the divine. And here's the more awkward part, that you are being seen as an element of the divine. Right? A creator, and a co-creator of the future. And that this person might be relying on you for the future they need. Just consider it, right? Now, again, notice your body. Are you tensing up? Are you nervous? Are you giggling? Are you crying? Are you looking away? Allow yourself to open a little more to this person. And one way to do that is to think that there's a little nexus, a little line between your heart and this person's heart. Okay, you can do this with your eyes open or closed, whichever is more comfortable. But there's a connection, and this is not me, this is science. Barbara Smith teaches us that the heart creates a vibration 10 feet around our bodies in every direction, strongest directly in front of us. So you're in this person's vibrational field, and they're in yours. And there's a little channel between your hearts, and just imagine what you would need to do to fully clear it. To fully clear it, to totally forgive this person anything they've ever done wrong, to totally be forgiven, to totally release the stereotypes that you've been taught about this person, and to let yourself be seen without the stereotypes they've been taught of you. And then imagine how clear it would have to be to co-create with this person a future where both of you could exist. Yeah. Now take a moment. The person with the longest hair is going to share first, right? So figure that out. You may need to, yeah. So don't fight about it because you just made all this good feeling. So the person with the longest hair, just share one thing that you are excited that you have already created in this world. One thing that you're excited you have already created in this world. Go ahead. Briefly. Just 10 more seconds, long hair. And come to a close, quiet, just quiet, and take that in. And for the short-haired person, just be, thank you. Just say thank you. All right? It's so brave to create in this world, and this person has already created something. So now, short-haired person, it's your chance to brag on yourself. Short or no hair, whatever you've got going on. What is one thing you've already created in this world? Go. Ten more seconds. All right. So bring that thought to a close for now, quietly. And now just thank your partner. Thank them in whatever way you want to, whatever way feels good to you, right? And then bring your attention up here just for one moment. So the person you just spent that time with, they might become your lifelong friend or your lifelong collaborator. You may never see them again, right? You may never see them again. The more likely thing is you might never see each other again. That's normally what happens for humans, especially in an environment like this. It's like we run into each other, we fall in love a little bit, and then we keep moving on with life. So a good release is important, right? So I wish you well is always a really beautiful way to say. So that, in a nutshell, is what emergent strategy is all about, is just doing something that is an emergent thing, trusting that the universe means for us to connect with each other. Our bodies we're the only creatures that are upright with everything vulnerable in us exposed like this. And I think it's for a reason. I think we are meant to face each other and to connect with each other and to see each other as co-creators of the future. So I invite you to co-create the future with me. I hope you all read the book. It's beautiful, beautiful stories. And I'll see you some other day.